very, very, very humbled and excited to introduce you our keynote speakers for this year's Manifest I.O., Robert Partisius and Alia Yunus. And I actually I'll let them introduce themselves because I don't want to do the scrolly thing of reading and doing the bios. But I will say that we've known each other for many years now. We met in New York University, Abu Dhabi, when I think I was like young and naive, and I even had long hair, and I'm still young and naive. But you both have been incredibly instrumental to my personal growth also, and taking me also in your journey into what is actually like heritage, how do we define it, and now I'm very humbled to have you here. Alia and Robert will present a topic, as you know, about heritage, and this is really the first time that we also introduce our keynote at the very beginning of the event, because it will actually shape the way that you look at all the works throughout the exhibition in the next 2 days. So no pressure. But thank you for joining us from Amsterdam and for Abu Dhabi. Welcome, Alia and Robert.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna begin. First of all, thank you, Harshini. She always makes us so proud, and this is an amazing event that we're so happy to be a part of, and really interested to see what's going to be coming up with the artists and the other presentations. Basically, I was going to start today just giving you a little bit of. I know this is an event about digital art and also sound and looking towards the future of art. But for us, we're using the oldest form of storytelling today, and that's heritage. But for us, as we hope we'll show you in this presentation, heritage is really about the present and also the future. And in fact, like I teach a science fiction class, and so much of what we do in the science fiction class is based on heritage, and so are so much of the classical science fiction stories that we have. So I hope that we'll be able to elaborate on that a little bit. Sometimes when I teach heritage studies at NYU, I start my class asking students what this stone is. And then I tell them this is a stone from Petra in Jordan, a World Heritage Site and one of the most visited tourist attractions in the Arab world. And it takes on a new meaning. It's no longer just a stone. And then I tell them that this is actually a stone that was given to my grandfather by a Bedouin in Petra, and it's been passed down from my family for 3 generations, and I'm now the recipient of it. Or I could tell you the story of the Bedouins in Petra who have been displaced so that tourists can come and see these stones and dig for more stones, as in the European archaeologists. So there's many stories to this stone, and there's very many. And so heritage is about the story, not the object. And there's many different ways of telling the story depending on who's telling it. So that's really what we want to sort of address today. And just to tell you a little bit about our connection, so we've been developing something called the HeritageLab over the last decade. And it's a reflection on the work of Robert, myself, and Felix Beck, who is not with us today. He's in Germany. He is German, and he's at the University of Münster. And we are from 3 very different disciplines. I'm primarily a writer and a filmmaker, and I did my graduate studies in memory studies. Robert is a maritime archaeologist and historian who's worked as a museum curator for a long time. And Felix works with interactive media design, and also he's a spatial designer of museums. So together we've formed this Heritage Lab that's multi-generational. So you're getting the older side of it today. And it's interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. So I think before we carry on any further, I'd like to have us tell you a little bit about ourselves. So I'm going to let Robert start with that, and then we'll kind of trade off back and forth today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the stone?
Sure.
No, I saw her doing it, and then she gave it around. Said, "Give around the stone, the stone." And then she said, "Oh yeah, this is just a stone, just a stone." And until she said, "Oh, but this is worthwhile because it's from people living on a World Heritage Site." All of the stone, that stone disappeared because then it became worth something. put somebody in the pocket. So thank you so much. No, but we try to introduce heritage to you because we believe that it is the most misused term at this moment in time. And one of the basic rules that we discover with having that Heritage Lab with all those different people from all over the world, different communities, is that you have to realize that you always bring yourself to the table. You always bring yourself into the culture. And for that reason, we put 2 slides together to introduce our, let's say, personal background. I grew up in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands sees themselves as what all kind of forms, like Germany sees themselves in all kind of forms. But one of the things we believe in is that we reclaim the land from the sea. So we made our own country. And as a little boy, I had the privilege to see the just reclaimed land, and I saw what was normally the kind of mystery on the seafloor, I saw on the seafloor. So I think from quite young onwards, I had the lure of the sea. And I followed that path over many, many years and became a maritime archaeologist. And the thing with maritime archaeology is that from a European perspective, it brings you all over the world. So it actually brought me, with the European expansion, it brought me to all the countries in Asia. And the thing with that type of shipwrecks is they're landing on somebody else's doorstep, and we still believe it is our heritage, while it is actually in somebody else's backyard. So that actually brought me on a track of looking at the world with very European eyes, but working in very different communities. And we will elaborate on that.
Okay, thank you for giving it back to me.
Sorry. We were looking for the reliable past. So we knew the past through archaeology. Sorry.
Yes, and I'm Palestinian that grew up in the diaspora in many parts of the world. And I came to Heritage as a concept after a fairly long career as a writer and a journalist and a filmmaker. And I actually didn't even think about the word heritage until I started to look at my own work and realize, oh, it's kind of all heritage-based. And I'd also been a journalist as my very first job, and that was a lot about people telling me their stories. And I started to put it all together in a novel called The Night Counter that came out from Random House, and then I realized that's what I was doing. I was telling the heritage of my family and my people in a way that was different than what I had been taught as a child when I got my early education in the United States. And when my whole dream was to be able to be as good as the girls and boys in that cookbook. And so I would learn to cook all the very American dishes so I could somehow be as American as everybody in the small town in Minnesota that we lived in. And I'm still very good at making things from Jell-O, and I learned all that at that time. And these are some of the places I worked as a journalist. I taught in the UAE for a very long time and worked a lot with the UAE that has a huge heritage desire to build their heritage and their heritage narrative. So that's down there is me working with some students filming in the desert. We filmed a story about the Arabian oryx, which is part of their heritage, that they're all bringing all of this heritage forward for nation building. But we really don't want to get stuck into heritage as nation building, but as something that doesn't really have borders, and that's sort of what we're going to talk about a little bit more. I'm turning it back to Robert.
Yeah. Now, so as I said, it is the most misused word to our opinion, because everything is heritage. This is just a brief collection of what you get from the internet if you look at the word heritage. So everything is heritage. When I was studying in the 1980s, the word heritage basically didn't exist as a serious discipline to study. So the question is really, why has it now been so, omnipresent? Everybody has a heritage. What was it before? And, when I grew up in the 1980s as a thinking person, heritage was, probably something for the indisputable monuments like the swings, but most of it was like grey men protecting their own castle. That was how we looked at heritage. And as I started as a socio-economic historian and an underwater archaeologist, so we were not interested in this type of heritage. Now my thing doesn't work anymore.
Okay.
Hang on.
It froze. Try this one.
No,
There it goes.
Okay. So, the first step to understand the heritage is that often it is seen as a thing that you pass from generation to generation, like the stone. But the stone was not, like the swings of stone was almost a very personal thing that has attached stories to it. If you go through the most reputed institute in the world for culture, the UNESCO, then this is the kind of most general definition that they give. That's heritage as a gift from the past to be handed over to the future. One of the things that we started to realize was really missing, and I don't want to make it a quiz, but if you have the past and the present, the future, then you actually leave the present out. And that is, I think, one of the basic things that we should look at also at the installations that I saw here outside here, that are kind of fragments of how people attach to their own culture, how they attach to their own past, is actually from the present, and maybe with an aim for the future, but heritage is always man-made. It is not just something that just exists by itself. It is made by people, and it has a purpose. It is a purpose. It can be cultural. It is my culture. It has often also an economic purpose, the tourist attraction, and most of the time also a political thing. We see heritage as a weapon to blow up somebody else's heritage, to marginalize somebody else's heritage. Where are we now? Yeah. Well, that means that the way we look at heritage can be very fragmented. I saw part of the installation. I haven't seen them all working, but I saw trees with images attached. I saw a bridge even that shows this changing narrative. So heritage in that respect is work in progress. And it is the use of the past for the present. So the future is nice, but it is basically what you want from your past right now. And it doesn't exist by itself. That stone, if it doesn't have a story, then it is just a stone. And it's constantly changing. So I had my personal slide, I had the look for a reliable past. And basically, this is the heritage, is the unreliable past. You can change it whenever you like. You can look at this building, and you can attach all kinds of stories to it, and that changes the uses of the building or even the appreciation of it. To give a better understanding of how heritage basically also is dictated to us, so that we don't always have control about our own heritage, I use the UNESCO World Heritage List. It's probably the best known way of how we look at heritage. A global World Heritage Site. Who never heard about the Global World Heritage List? I think everybody knows a World Heritage List. Well, the concept of a World Heritage List is not new. It's basically, if you look at the 7 World Wonders, it was thousands of years ago, they already had that idea of these are the concepts of what is so representing our culture and is so valuable to keep. If you look at the where those world wonders were, then one of the things you notice is that it's the known world from then. It is not a known world because China was already, they probably would have produced world wonders at that time also, but it was really the people that looked at it, decided that was their known world. If you do a competition like they did in 2012, what would be now the World Heritage, the world wonders of the world? Then you see that the pyramids are only surviving. The other ones are world wonders that were not world wonders at that time. And what is also striking, it are the kind of dysfunctional empires that producing world wonders. It is not the traditions and vibrant cultures that we have now. It are dysfunctional empires. So if you look at the World Heritage Site and the division over the world, so this is the now known world, and you see an image how they show the world wonders, then you immediately see that it is very limited to churches, castles, buildings. It's a very, I think, European way of looking at the world. And if you don't take 3 of those world sites, then the concept of shared heritage is kind of, okay, what does those things bind together? Why is the Sphinx, we recognize this as World Heritage, but the totem or the Wall of China, what has that to do with each other? And they developed actually the idea of outstanding and universal values. So something is so exceptional, so that it is appreciated by everybody in the world, that it is regardless your social, your economic standard. So that is the way we should look at the world and their values. But then the question is, who decides that? Who owns basically those values? And if you then look at how that is done, then it is actually a whole process. It is not something that you feel as being your heritage. It is that something goes through a nomination process. It needs to be listed. Then you have to create the values, the criteria. The experts play an important role. And many see the UNESCO as the big paper factory in which all those steps are done. And finally, it are the experts who decide. Well, this slide is now a little bit orange, but normally it's, you can see that it is a very wide audience. These are the experts from ICOMOS who decide what is, valuable, what is not valuable. And this was a beautiful photo. I'm somewhere in the photo too. I'm also one of those experts. But, even the women, you can see the women without a name tag are probably the spouses of one of the male. So, this is rapidly changing, by the way. UNESCO is making big steps, but this is still a really good illustration of what is wrong with this whole concept of heritage that is what we call authorized, that it has been labeled as official heritage. If you look at the world now, then it's one of the things that will, catch your eye is that Europe is very, very busy. And Africa, South America, we know that, of course, they don't have that much culture. South America, no culture. Africa, no culture. Of course not. They only don't have those castles, those churches that are so enduring the time. So this was one of the biggest issues that they also saw in the course of the developing of that World Heritage List, is that it's very unequally divided over the world. Europe, almost half of the sites are in Europe. So how come? And and how to prevent that from how to balance actually the world again. And so from 1994 onwards, they say, okay, let's balance the world. How do we do that? We can't put churches all of a sudden in Africa that we also used to give them that world status. Let's get the intangible. This is very tangible. There are a lot of traditions and cultures that are not represented in stone. So they started to talk about the intangible heritage. And again, like UNESCO, you're going to sit down with experts, you're going to talk about it, you're producing all kinds of reports, and somewhere in 2003, 2005, they finally had the way to do this. And they were able to nominate not only tangible sites, but also intangible sites. But then, 10 years later, again, Europe needed a separate map for all their intangible heritage. So it was not as such the item, a castle against the tradition, it was just, again, the experts who decide what is heritage and what is not heritage. So there is something fundamentally wrong with how you look at the world and how you appreciate other people's culture and appreciate the heritage. And as was clear in the introduction, earlier, I came in as an academic, archaeologist and a museum curator, but I was in that kind of European vision. You come from another background with another discipline, so you take over for explaining more about the intangible.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it is breaking this idea of heritage being connected to the nation, and that it's about shared heritage that's intangible. And that is very much, we talk a lot about inherited trauma, but we also have inherited heritage. It lives in our body. Some of it is physical. I mean, we inherit things, the same root word, but it's also what we inherit in the collective memories and in the way we behave with our landscape and our new environments when we end up in them. And a lot of it is, about you want your heritage because you have your right to your identity, and not just the identity that's been imposed on you by UNESCO or powers that be that are usually in the West, and the right to exist and to have proof of existence. And so I started to think a lot about landscape as heritage, and that a lot of us, wherever we were born and raised or wherever we consider ourselves from, that land speaks to us, and it carries our identity and it carries our heritage in it. And that's not so much about the national borders. It's about spaces. So for example, I made a film called The Golden Harvest that looks at olive oil and how olive trees and olive oil connect the Mediterranean cultures regardless of these natural borders. And I did it partly because I am Palestinian, and I wanted to, this denial of the Palestinian heritage as Mediterranean, until now we want to turn Gaza into a resort. But until then, there was no discussion of us being part of the Mediterranean world. We were isolated, especially in the Western framework, as people that are occupied, but that are less than the people who have occupied them. So I thought, to give you an idea of that, and it's not such a political film as I just said, I'm going to play you a section of it. This isn't quite the beginning, but very close to the beginning. And it's the idea of maybe we should think of heritage as shared rather than compartmentalized. Thank you, if you would hit the...
Whenever I disliked my meal, my father would say, "Oh, stop complaining and just pour some olive oil on it. It'll be fine." "No, you stop saying weird things," I used to think. But then we left the Midwest for the Middle East, specifically Lebanon. And there, my best friend's grandmother would say, "Bread and cheese are fine, but olive oil and bread are divine." And then she'd pour more oil on our food. In Lebanon, while my brother and his friends amused themselves collecting bullet casings from the street, I became obsessed with cooking. When nothing else worked in Lebanon, the food always did. And olive oil was in every recipe neighbors and relatives shared with me, even if they were cut off from their own supply.
Going 2 or 3 days without olive oil, you'll get that hunger pang in your stomach saying that, there's something missing here.
Without oil, there's no gladness.
Later, we moved from Lebanon to Greece, like olive oil did 6,000 years before, via the Phoenicians. In Athens, it was the small talk on the street.
So it was about 5.3 to 1. 5.3 kilos to 1 kilo.
I had 4.8 to 1.
Well, you've got
which
better
was better, but we didn't have as many olives.
Good luck.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye.
In every opening of an olive oil bottle, I started to see what most of us eventually see about our parents. My father wasn't that weird. He was just from the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean diet, traditional Mediterranean diet, without olive oil, do not exist.
Since my father is not alive anymore, then I feel I take care of these trees. Like, I don't know if that's a love story. It is more than love story. It is just my roots.
I understood Enzo. After my father died, when I thought about the rare times he looked happy, it was when he was critiquing a new batch of olive oil. But long before I was born, my father left his trees behind in Palestine, in what is now Israel. Palestine was one of the first things I learned to love. The absent love in both my parents' lives. the love they carried to America in a bottle.
And I guess I should have phrased it a little bit that was filmed in 5 different places. So Palestine, Greece, Spain, and Italy, and then a little bit from another place. But yeah, so I started to think about this shared heritage that these people all, they've had different histories, but they've had the same heritage, if that makes sense. And that heritage is from the land and what that land has given them and how it's nurtured them and how it makes their life recognizable to them. And so I thought about that, but then I don't want to just say that the landscape is a beautiful thing. The landscape is also, Robert touched on this a little bit, that heritage also becomes a weapon. And the landscape is one of the things that has also become something in which heritage is erased and replaced by a different landscape, so it's no longer recognizable to the native people, or it is destroyed so they can no longer exist, because without your relationship to the land, especially when you're talking about agrarian societies, then you don't even know you can't physically survive, because for generations your heritage has told you how to take care of this land, and that's what you know. And if it's been destroyed in some ways, then you can't. And so I think there's a lot, and this is, I'm talking about land now, but it goes towards all forms of heritage that is denied or contested or taken away or destroyed. Up here on the screen is someone I filmed in Bethlehem, Vivian Sansour, who calls herself an agro-resistor. This clip was not in the film, but I thought it would be a good way to talk about, again, the power of heritage on the land. And again, I'm talking a lot about trees when I talk about landscape, but that's just where my head's been for the last few years. And if we don't, let's play this clip of Vivian. Oh, audio problem again.
So you can see the biodiversity here. It's quite intense. We have here almonds, pomegranates, of course olives, carob, oak. And traditionally, like, people have discovered that when you have this biodiversity, when, like, for example, there's an oak tree in an olive field, it's healthier for the olive tree and it can fight off diseases that can otherwise attack an olive tree. But this biodiversity here is threatened. As you can see on the other side of this mountain, it's a completely different vegetation, all these non-native pine trees. And if you look very closely, you'll see that these pine trees serve different purposes. One purpose that Israel has planted them around these settlements is to hide evidence of the fact that there were people here before. If you look very closely, you'll see there are ancient terracing, old Palestinian house. So when you plant these pine trees, they take over and they cover any evidence that people, an agricultural civilization that was very sophisticated, was living there. But also because a lot of these settlers come from Europe or the United States and they want to recreate the world that they lived in. One other problem with these pine trees is that since they're non-native and since they're intrusive to this terrain, once you plant them there and they grow, the land becomes uncultivable. We cannot cultivate this land after a while. And according to Israeli law, we can go to prison, we can be fined if we cut down these trees. If you separate people from their land, you separate people from their groves, and for me, you separate them from their soul. And what do we have left? We are living in these enclosed concrete jungles now.
So I have spoken a lot about Palestine in this, but this is something you see all over the world. Perhaps not as violently as you see it there, but this changing of landscapes and the displacement of people from their identities and their heritage, and that causes a lot of disconnect. And it's also, the other topic that's a hot topic is, environmental situation we're in and climate change. And a lot of it is also caused by disconnecting us from our heritage and our land and our ways of keeping land going. Of course, there's a practical element. We are more people than we once were, and we do need other systems as well. So it's not against science, but it's against the idea of the purposeful destruction of other people's heritage for other reasons. And I'll try to end my talk on trees on a slightly lighter note sometimes. So I've been working on this other project called Tree Routed. It's part of the HeritageLab, which we're going to talk about later. And in it, I started to think about, and it's a team project. And we all started to think, well, you know, there's a mango tree that has a very personal story in Goa, India, where the mango originates. And then you can go to Honduras, and you can find a mango story there in someone's garden that's very personal. But then what connects that mango tree in Goa, India, to the one in Honduras in terms of heritage? So of course, a lot of it is migration, forced and by choice. And so we started to make these connections. So for example, in Goa, we recorded someone in his garden talking about the trees his grandmother had taken care of while the rest of the family was trying to make money abroad. And now, you know, how deeply affected he's been by the loss of one of the mango trees. And then in Honduras, we interviewed 3 generations of women that lives have revolved around a mango tree there. But in between, we find out the stories of humanity that led a mango tree to go from Goa to Honduras. And so we have different colored lines for different fruits, and it's a work in progress. And then the trees where we do have stories, so if this was mango, the Palestinian stories, all these cities would not show up because they're not mango ones except for Lahore. And so that's sort of the idea. I love doing this project because you have no idea how many amazing personal stories and heritage stories come from trees. So that's what I'm going to talk about from now, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Robert to carry on.
So I'm going back to, because this was zooming into how heritage is actually meant to be. You know, you're representing your culture, and you have a way of recording your own heritage and also expressing your own heritage, presenting it. That's the HeritageLab we're coming on. But just to go back to that authorized heritage, because that is still the way the world decides whether you should appreciate something or not. So when I started as a maritime archaeologist, following the shipwrecks all over the world, I basically was what we called shared heritage between the Netherlands and Sri Lanka, for instance. We did a project in Sri Lanka, and we knew how to do this. So we were training people, we were building capacity, and I didn't realize at that stage that I was basically telling them how to apply to that authorized heritage, how to do the techniques to do. There was the best practice that they had to follow. And slowly I started to realize by digging up a shipwreck, we brought things up to the surface that nobody knew that was there before, or forgotten. So there were new elements of heritage, and it was in a World Heritage Site goal. And all of a sudden, I started to witness, in the years that I worked there, that heritage started leading a life with itself. Basically, we were creating heritage, and all those elements of stories were adding to an already existing story and already an existing culture. So all those labels on the same site, I started to realize, basically, it is not about that reliable past that we could dig up. It is actually what people decide to do with that past. And that was still very much dictated by me coming from the West, knowing what I was doing, and also with a big pocket full of money from my government to set up that kind, with all good intentions. But then I started to realize that basically what we were doing was putting our values, those outstanding values, over all those sites. And although I started to realize that that was not entirely what we should do in the world, I carried on doing what I was doing, and my government said, oh, you were such a successful project, we have a project with South Africa. You know, they are now free, they want to learn about underwater archaeology also. Now, basically, I landed in South Africa. This is a cartoon by a South African. Basically, that is how it felt. I felt like the hair in the soup. They said, listen, you know, it's great that our government wants you to come here and they have money for it, but you want to teach our people, you know, it is only a few years after apartheid, you want to teach them about Dutch shipwrecks. I said, well, that was the basic idea of my government. Say, okay, you know, they liked me, they could see that I was with good intentions. I started to understand a little bit what I was doing. They said, why don't you go to Robben Island? If they like you, then you're in. Otherwise, you know, we don't want to have you here. So I went with my colleagues to Robben Island, and luckily they just got UNESCO visit by the experts, and they were telling them, listen, you're a World Heritage Site, it's a disgrace, you don't manage it properly. So all those European values, they got in a report. And so the people from Robben Island saw me as a white, you know, still younger guy, and they thought, okay, he's one of them, so he can help us to, you know, that UNESCO likes us again. So they actually accepted me, but on one condition, and that was that we would choose another approach. And luckily, and I will just after this, parallel to this project, we also worked in Afghanistan, and we basically learned the power of, instead of having all those definitions, all those values, we work with an open definition. There's nothing is more valuable than the other thing. And basically, that is where my education was shaping up after I was already, you know, a specialist. This is how I learned what heritage can be and what it should be. So basically, we were making these drawings and looking at the heritage from a completely other side. And they started to introduce timelines that were overlapping, principles of the island. You know, we know the island, hopefully everybody still knows that, of Nelson Mandela's prison and the fight against apartheid, but it was for centuries, it was an island of exclusion. So bringing those different layers together was a very exciting thing, together with the stories of the ex-political prisoners. For time's sake, I'm going a little bit faster because there's so many stories to tell there, and Harshini was with us at a certain moment. But the real thing I learned was also in Afghanistan. I was leading an organization that was, the government liked us, they said, you do good work. Afghanistan was just invaded, liberated, whatever name you call it, but there was the idea, but if you bring culture, you can help the people to build their own idea of freedom, so, and development. So they asked us to help to develop a museum in one of the provinces. And again, like that happened in South Africa, they said, we much appreciate for you to come and donate your money, but you have no idea what you're doing here. I said, no, I know, I have no idea what we're doing. And so basically, they helped us to develop that idea, what they really wanted to protect, their rich collection, and that was of course something that the West would appreciate, but talking about how a museum should be shaped up was completely different than we would do in the West. So instead of doing the building first, they wanted to do the surroundings first. And I said, yeah, but that's the landscaping, you do it after you did the whole museum. So basically they, after a long process, do you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm good. Instead of following all those steps that we would do in the West, he did it the other way around. And basically, because there was a reason, that is all sorry. Yeah, because that palace was not there. They were never part of that palace. But they were able to use the surroundings of the palace. So they were using it basically for their picnics, to receive people in the garden. So what they did was restoring the gardens, and the palace in the projects that we did was never restored. It were the gardens around it, the walls around it. And they made in the palace a kind of a meeting place. So for me, that whole process of learning about other approaches to heritage was shaped up at that two projects in South Africa, in Africa in general, and in Afghanistan. Are you going to tell us more about this? Or?
You can start it and I'll
Okay. So we rehearsed how we do the. Okay.
Yeah, you start this one. Go ahead.
I hear myself so much back. Yeah.
1 minute left, maybe.
1 minute left.
Yes.
Then we stop.
Yes. It's mine.
Okay.
I'm just going to go to the Heritage Lab then.
You go.
I skipped Saadiyat Island. I'm just going to talk about really quickly the Heritage Lab. So we have, the Heritage Lab is collaborative with people of many generations and locations in the world. And this is, I'm going to skip this, but this was a book that we started in COVID, and it was written by 7 students. They're not students anymore. And it just came out this year and looked at different websites in terms of looking at websites, heritage sites that they are personally connected to, so that they come from the community perspective, or at least one community at the site, and looking at it from all these different ways. You can look at heritage, which we're not going to get into now, should we just play this one while I wrap it up, or?
I think we just wrap it up.
You wrap it up. We can play the video while you wrap it up.
Okay. Okay. Now we wrap it up by, the idea is that we have a new approach on heritage that should be open for all the communities that we're working with. So we set up a heritage lab that's an independent space, like this festival. It's owned by nobody. We get, of course, all kind of money in, but it is not owned by somebody, not owned by a big university. So smaller communities feel the freedom to connect, to record their heritage in the way they want to record their heritage, and to express it on a digital platform that we're now developing, in which those layers can be visible. It's all work in progress, and we hope to be very much inspired by the work we see here in the festival. And I think that...
Wait, you had one more thing you wanted to say. This is what Felix would have talked about. Oh, we got an award last year from UNESCO, yay.
That is without a minute.
And then this.
Okay. Oh, yeah. The phrase that you put together.
That's how we'll end.
Okay. Now, I think that's how we wrapped up. The message is the past is, we think we know the past, but it is like the future. It's always different than you think it is. So thank you for your attention.